Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Talking Nerdy with Ruff. This is the 33%, and this is my second video this week because I didn't put one out last week. This episode is going to strictly talk about crossover event Marvel 2005 House of M. If y'all watched not the last video but the video before, episode 4, I talked about Avengers Disassembled, and it leads into House of M, and House of M will lead into, I believe, Civil War, which leads into Planet Hulk. It's a long timeline of crossovers. House of M was, what happened in the House of M is, what happened in Avengers Disassembled. Scarlet Witch went crazy. She sent, I believe, Genosha with Charles, Xavier, and Magneto trying to take care of her. Charles realizes his powers can't sustain her anymore. He can't keep doing what he's doing. It's tiring him out physically and mentally, and because for a mutant to use their powers, it uses so much physical strength as well as mental strength. He contacts Doctor Strange to get him to come and try to help control Wanda, what's going on with her, and he can't either. So what happens is Xavier arranges for there to be a meeting between the Avengers and the X-Men, several heroes, it's just random heroes, at the Avengers Tower to decide the fate of Wanda Maximoff, because there has to be a permanent solution. He can't keep doing what he's doing. Magneto, him and Magneto talk about it, and Magneto blames himself for all he's put his children through, and that's led him to this. Emma Frost concludes that killing Wanda is the only way to end her destructive magic. Captain America argues that the group should seek alternative methods of dealing with Wanda, including suppression of her powers and her insanity. The X-Men argue if word gets out a mutant with the ability to change reality went insane, it would send human-mutant relations back to Stone Age. As the conversation progresses, it's revealed Doctor Strange was asked to help Wanda, but unfortunately neither was strong enough to combat her magic. Wolverine speaks up, saying that there is no other way. Wanda must be killed. The rest of the group decides they must talk to Wanda in person before making their decision. Back in Genosha, distraught Quicksilver rushes to Magneto and reveals that he was just in New York City, where he heard that the X-Men Avengers are planning on killing Wanda. Magneto does not know what to do and, clearly upset, asks, "What would you have me do?" Quicksilver falls to the floor sobbing. Magneto glances over at his sleeping daughter. Xavier takes two groups to Genosha only to discover that Wanda's missing. Suddenly, members of the group start to disappear one by one. Spider-Man is soon the only one left and becomes engulfed in white light. When the light departs, world has changed. Spider-Man's a celebrity, married to Gwen Stacy. Cyclops and Emma Frost are married. Doctor Strange is a psychologist. Carol Danvers is Captain Marvel. America's most beloved superhero, Gambit, is a criminal, and Steve Rogers is an aged veteran. As vignettes of their lives are followed, it becomes readily apparent that none of them remember the change. Wolverine recalls all of his lost memories and knows this new world is a lie. He finds the world has changed into one where Homo superior is the dominant species instead of Homo sapiens. Mutants rule humans, and Magneto and his House of M rules mutants. Wolverine seeks to help from his fellow X-Men Avengers. Unable to find Professor X, he goes looking for Spider-Man and Tony Stark. He is confronted by his teammates in the Red Guard, elite mutant soldiers of S.H.I.E.L.D. Wolverine escapes and finds the Human Resistance Movement led by Luke Cage. Cage has gathered other non-mutant crime fighters to protect humans from House of M's abuse of power. Wolverine is shocked to see one of the members is Clint Barton, Hawkeye, a hero who died in the real world. Hawkeye was killed in Avengers Disassembled by Wanda's powers, and it was a big deal when they killed Hawkeye. I know people are really upset with the current cinematic universe choices, but the comics, they've been killing beloved characters for a long time, and they eventually come back, sometimes quicker than others and sometimes by more plausible ways, but pretty well everybody comes back at some point if they are a major character. Though some of the lesser characters can die and not be returned, but pretty much when you die you stay dead. And I mean, pretty much when you die, you stay dead for a little while. Usually, there's some kind of continuity. Like the X-Men are terrible with messing with the timeline. They'll travel back in time to fix something. It screws up something else, or it changes. By them fixing it and being seen, it causes somebody else's origin. And there's another super powerful mutant, usually that they got to face in the future or the past, and then they end up becoming part of the X-Men. It's a constant thing. Wolverine explains why he knows this world was created by Scarlet Witch. He theorizes Magneto used her to create a world where everyone's deepest wish was granted. Magneto got the mutant supremacy he always wanted. Spider-Man got a life of happiness and contentment. Wolverine is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. but remembers the world from before House M. Cage reveals a little girl named Layla Miller told him almost exactly the same thing days ago. As the hero began visiting the Avengers and X-Men in their new lives as Layla awakens their true memories. So they're going around to all these people that are part of the they're not part of the House of M, but they're part of the story, because it changes the whole. Again, Scarlet Witch is one of the most powerful mutants or beings in Earth 616, which Earth 616 is Earth's normal timeline. That's your timeline with the Avengers, X-Men, Fantastic Four, going back to the 60s. Now, in the time between the 60s and now, there is time lapses in the continuity. Like Age of Apocalypse, when Age of Apocalypse was going on, all the X-Men titles, the 616 titles, didn't exist. That was all that happened, was the Age of Apocalypse. When House of M was going on, none of the other titles existed. This was the continuity, because she changed Earth 616 into this. Now, later on they changed it into a different number, and they say that happened on a different Earth, but it kind of didn't. That's one of the kind of catch-22s, because you can't say, well, everything happened in a different universe, because that was DC's problem with the multiverse and DC's Infinite Crisis on multiple Earths. They streamline their timelines, their continuities, where they didn't have Superman, this Superman, that Superman, that Superman, that Superman. They have one, and then all the other ones, that's the main timeline. There's other ones, like the Flashpoint universe. There's I'm not that familiar with DC, but I know there's other universes, and there's other ones with Marvel. There's the Age of Apocalypse, of course. There's the House of M. I've got a nice poster with all the different continuities that was in the Battle World for Secret Wars a couple years ago, the crossover. Hulk, the World War Hulk Planet Hulk storyline, where Scar and all those people come from. That's one of the continuities, and it's different Earths, and it's different. It's almost like a what if for every yes and no question, or big thing that happens in the Marvel Universe. There's a different outcome, and there's an Earth with that outcome, kind of. Anyways, moving forward, the wake-up call. Wolverine and the Human Resistance awakened many heroes to the truth, including Cyclops, Spider-Man, Shadowcat, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, She-Hulk, Daredevil, Rogue, Mystique, Nightcrawler, Toad, and Spider-Woman. Hawkeye becomes distraught over learning of his death and briefly leaves the group. The rest travel to Genosha for a final confrontation with Magneto. Back in Genosha, Magneto receives representatives from around the world to commemorate the mutant triumph over humanity. The heroes attack Magneto and his family directly, while Cloak, Emma Frost, Doctor Strange, and Lila search for Xavier. They find a gravestone with Xavier's name, but Cloak discovers no body beneath it. Xavier's another one they've killed several times. I know he's died. I can think of 4 off the top of my head where they've killed Xavier, and 2 of them in the last, this one and the Avengers versus X-Men storyline. They've killed twice in the last 10 years. It's over 10 years now. Last 15 years. The battle between the House of M and the heroes continues with great ferocity. While the chaos ensues, the Scarlet Witch disappears from the battlefield, only to be discovered by Doctor Strange in a tower with her children. The two begin to talk as Doctor Strange attempts to discover the origin of the madness that is happening. Wanda reveals the answer to him in a flashback from when Quicksilver confronted Magneto about the fate of Wanda. It turns out that Quicksilver himself was the one responsible for the creation of the alternate world, suggesting to Wanda to make everyone happy in an almost perfect world. After this revelation, Emma Frost tells Doctor Strange to ask about the fate of Charles Xavier. Before she can answer, Wanda is struck in the back by an arrow. Attackers Hawkeye, who begins to break down emotionally to Wanda about his death in the real timeline. After a heated exchange, Hawkeye is killed for the second time, as one Scarlet Witch's antagonized sons uses mutant powers to erase the Avenger. Meanwhile, in the Memorial Garden, Magneto confronts Emma Frost and Layla Miller, who reveal the truth to Magneto about all that has happened. He then unleashes his wrath on everyone, especially his son Quicksilver. He kills Quicksilver by pummeling him to a bloody pulp with a large piece of steel. Suddenly, the Scarlet Witch appears, turns her brother to life. She begins to lash out, saying, "We're freaks, mutants. You choose this over us, and you ruined us, Daddy." She then utters, "No more mutants." Everything turns white again. So, the whole relationship between Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Magneto, and there's also Polaris, who's the younger sister, best I can remember. I think she has a different mother. But Wanda and Peter are twins. And it's a really messed up relationship. The first time you see them is X-Men number 4, I believe, and they're with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And they make a couple cameo appearances. The next time you see them is Avengers. I remember the cover, but I don't remember the number. Maybe 12 or 15, where they're on the cover and they've turned from bad guys to they're joining the Avengers. And when they join the Avengers, they of course become enemies of Magneto, because Magneto is the bad guy, one of the, especially at that time, one of the big baddies. And it's always been a strained relationship. There was, I mean, I doubt there was many bounty houses and stuff as children, because their daddy is a international terrorist, which wasn't called terrorist at the time. He was a, I guess, extremist, but he really didn't do much to help him out for a long time. Later in life, Magneto, of course, comes to regret that. In different storylines, he redeems himself. Which Magneto's a very flawed character, like all Marvel characters are. There's hardly any, I can't think of one off the top of my head that's just like a great character that doesn't have any problems. All these characters are very flawed individuals dealing with situations that they're not aptly able to handle. They can't just inherently do the best, and they can do the best they can, I hope for, but they can't just do something and know it's right. Whereas I read a quote one time, and it says, it was Marvel is humans trying to deal with becoming gods, because of their powers and everything. DC is gods trying to be humans. It's not as, and it's not no groundbreaking thing to think, but I understand and relate to that, because DC characters are always less flawed to me. They're more put together people and harder to relate to. In a blinded flash, world seemingly returns to normal. The Avengers come together to try to make sense of what happened that night, only to be confronted by a distraught Doctor Strange, who states that the House of M really took place. Its effects are slowly being felt on a wider scale. They later get an alert from the ruins of Avengers Mansion. Investigate, and they find Hawkeye's uniform pinned to a wall with his arrows, suggesting Hawkeye's alive. Dead in Avengers Disassemble, alive in House of M, dies in House of M, maybe still alive in House of M, because he was wiped away by one of Scarlet Witch's kids. They screwed with Hawkeye a lot at this time. At the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning, most of the students lose their mutant abilities. Emma Frost scans the whole world with Cerebro for mutant activity. She learns the number of mutants in the world has dropped from millions to a few hundred. Meanwhile, Wolverine awakens, remembering everything about his past. The X-Men fly to Genosha looking for Magneto and his children. They find Magneto is also powerless and does not know where Wanda or Quicksilver is gone. Heroes can only guess what has caused the majority of the mutant population to lose their powers. Xavier is still missing. Cerebro and Doctor Strange are unable to detect Scarlet Witch. Hank Pym warns that all these powers cannot simply vanish. They are contained somewhere, and that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. The question remains, as Pym said, what will be the reaction? As if to punctuate the statement, a colossal red ribbon of energy begins to orbit Earth, implying the return of Phoenix Force. This would also signal the beginnings of the Avengers vs. X-Men saga. The House of M storyline resulted in a reduction of the mutant population from millions to hundreds. Only 2 current members of the X-Men, Polaris and Professor Xavier, suffered this fate, as well as former X-Men Chamber. Several minor allies and enemies were depowered, including Callisto and the Blob. Although their main adversary Magneto also lost his abilities, as have 2 members of the Avengers, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. Magneto and Xavier have since been repowered, whilst Polaris and Quicksilver and others have either gained new powers, sometimes almost exactly like their old ones, or regained lost powers by other means. Within a span of well under 2 years, other reasonably popular mutants have also been repowered by technology, such as Wind Dancer and Jubilee. The temporary disappearance of Charles Xavier, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver is explained in the Son of M limited series. Xavier comes back in Deadly Genesis. This death, he comes back in X-Men Deadly Genesis. Wolverine's total recall of his past, which caused a serious change in his status. Multiple governments and agencies for which he has worked, or which have manipulated him, consider him to be one of the most dangerous threats. Now Wolverine, James Howlett, I think is what his actual name is, remembers everything. He remembers all the way back to when they started messing with him. Remembers getting who gave him at this time. Now I'm pretty sure he loses it again, but he remembered everything. Though not explicitly expressed in the House of M series, as of New Avengers 26, Clint Barton has been revived in the Marvel Universe. Shadow King was able to return. Onslaught was reborn. What else? The Skrulls gained a massive advantage in their infiltration and sabotage, with so many millions of mutants killed, lost, powerless. One of the 3 primary threats, Varanki stated, was neutralized. With all the mutant energy released, Vulcan, the 3rd Summers brother, was revived from a long slumber. Ilyana Rasputin was reborn as Darkchild. The Exiles began their world's tour to chase down Proteus, who has been reborn into that world, and that was the first of 6 different worlds they stopped in. Trying to find where they renamed this Earth. This is a pretty big crossover, and this was the first one. I started back reading comics at the end of Avengers Disassembled, and this was the first one that was really, I got the whole thing. I got to read the whole thing as it come out. And I've got some of the comics here for you. This is House M Director's Cut. Secrets of the House of M. This is a variant of issue 1 of House of M. This is the regular cover. It's issue 2, issue 3, issue 4. That's all the ones I dug out. And I had multiples of some of these, which is unusual because, like, I don't hardly buy variants. And this, well, I've got 2 variants and 1 right here. And I'm sure there's more if I went through all my boxes. But it was a really good series, and this section of crossovers from, in my opinion, the timeline goes a little different. But from Avengers Disassembled to Avengers vs. X-Men is some of the best, well thought out, huge storyline that Marvel's ever done. They've done crossovers before. This was a pretty big scale, which, the early X-Men crossovers was a big scale for what there was. But it's great storytelling. It's very well put together. Brian Michael Bendis was really knocking it out of the park this time. And it's a good it's a good one to start on because it's not the beginning, but it's a lot of the stuff that happens now in the comics goes back to these series, to Disassembled, House of M, Civil War, Dark Reign, what does it have? Secret Invasion. Those are really a lot of the storylines that they've built upon recently. And I hope y'all enjoy this. The next one will either be Avengers versus X-Men or Civil War. Civil War followed by World War Hulk, Messiah Complex, Secret Invasion. It was Secret Invasion. Messiah War, Utopia, Necrotia, Follow the Hulks, Siege. Some of these are not major ones. There's a lot of these are the smaller ones, like Spider Island crossover. Fear Itself, Avengers vs. X-Men, Age of Ultron. Avengers vs. X-Men is probably the best read of any of these, especially if you've read Civil War, House of M, Avengers Disassembled. Avengers vs. X-Men really ties up a lot of the stuff between characters. It's not so much the storylines. The storylines are pretty contained within the miniseries, but it's stuff that has been building for years between these characters. And Avengers vs. X-Men is an excellent read because you see rivalries and friendships ripped apart, just shredded, and started over. It's one of my favorite crossover events. Probably my favorite crossover event. I think Sandman will be my favorite comic, and then that'll be my favorite crossover event. The X-Men are my favorite superhero team because I can't make my own. But if I could, I'd have some pretty awesome Avengers. I like the Avengers team, but it has some X-Men in it, and it have other people too, Alpha Flight. Anyway, I hope everyone's enjoyed this. I'm gonna go ahead and upload this today instead of tomorrow, instead of making y'all wait till tomorrow. Maybe too much for you in one day. I'll be back on schedule next week for episode 7, and it'll be TV shows and movies again. I don't know, probably 2 movies and 2 shows, or 2 shows and a movie, or something to that effect. If any of y'all have anything that you'd like me to review, if I've seen it, I'll go ahead and review it, and if not, I'll try to watch it before I review it, but I will review it at some point. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. I hope y'all have a great day.